So what is a resume? It is a snapshot of your experience, credentials, and skills, as some of y'all posted in the chat. It's a way to see if you fit the job for employers or for advisory boards at a college that you're trying to apply to. It's an avenue to sell yourself, as Hillary said, and you need to tailor it for the job that you want. So if you look at the screen, we have an example of Peter Parker's resume. So you can see that he's listing his skills, how well he thinks he does in those skills, and his accomplishments show that he has prior experience in battling villains with like mechanical weaponry. So maybe if like the Avengers are like, oh, we have this new villain that's like Doc Ock, they'll look at his resume and say, wow, he knows how to handle this, if that makes sense. And now I'm going to hand it over to Halima.
Hey, so next we're going to go into what the different types of sections of resumes are, and then we're going to talk about specifically how to write those sections. And then later on during the interactive activity, we're going to be looking at different examples of those sections. So the different sections, you're going to have a header, go over your education, work experience, extracurricular experiences, skills, honors and awards, and then there's like an optional about me section if you have space and you want to include like fun facts about yourself. So the first section is the header. So in this, you're basically saying who you are, like your basic contact information. So you're going to include your name, and a lot of resume formatting will have you include your name kind of like bigger font than the rest of your stuff, just to make sure it stands out and the recruiter knows who you are. And then for contact information, you definitely want to make sure you have your phone number, a professional email. I think we all have those emails that we made in middle school that maybe aren't as professional sounding. So if you don't have one that is as professional sounding, definitely recommended that you do make one that is more professional. Address, that is kind of like an optional thing to include in the header. I personally include my address, but I know some other people don't. Definitely look if the posting like has specifications. If you're applying somewhere that isn't local to where your address is, you might not want to include it, depending if you're concerned about if they know you'd be willing to relocate. And then if you do have a LinkedIn, which is a professional social media, kind of like a Facebook thing, then you can also include your LinkedIn URL as your contact. And then your next section is going to be your education. So you're going to want to include your most recent education first and then kind of build backwards. So if you're in college right now, you're going to want to include that as your first experience. And then your high school experience will also include, depending on how far you are out of high school, you might or might not want to include that depending on what you're trying to highlight for your application. So you're going to want to include the city and state where you attended your institution, your date of graduation. If you haven't graduated yet, you can put your anticipated date of graduation, like the month and year with that. And then you're going to want to make sure you're including any degrees, certifications, et cetera, that you've earned or are expecting to earn. And then for college, you're going to want to include your major or majors, minors, areas of focus. And then you want to have your cumulative GPA included for high school and college. For your college GPA, if your major GPA is higher than your cumulative GPA, you can definitely include both. That can just really highlight, if you have the higher GPA in your major, that you do have that expertise in your major specifically. And then next, you're going to want to talk about your experiences. So you want to make sure you're talking about your work experiences and your extracurricular experiences. This is personally up to you, styling, if you want to include these as one section labeled experience or something like that, or as two sections. But for work experiences, you want to talk about jobs that you've had, whether they've been paid or unpaid, and internships, again, also paid and unpaid, highlighting those experiences that you have. And then for extracurricular experiences, you want to talk about extracurricular involvement. So this can include stuff in your community, volunteering that you've done, sports you've been a part of, clubs you've been a part of, again, whether through school or in the community. And I definitely want to highlight for work experiences, it doesn't have to be like quote unquote professional experiences. So really any work experience shows dedication, that you're getting out there, that you're a hard worker. So don't sell yourself short on that. So for example, if you've been a server for a few years, definitely include that. There's a lot of skills that you've earned through that. Sorry, my cat's like going crazy right now. You want to highlight like those customer service skills, so don't sell yourself short on anything with that. So diving a little more into writing about your experiences, again, be sure to include everything that you've been a part of. Like with education, you want to include your most recent experiences first, and then you want to include the organization or the company that you've been with, the title that you had with your position, include the location, so the city and state, and the time you've been involved, so like the month and year range. So for example, you started in June of 2018 and you finish in January of 2020. So include that range. If you still work there, you can say like through present. And then we'll be talking more about this later, but you want to start off your bullet points with including like your key experiences and accomplishments within these experiences with action verbs. So we'll go more into that. We have a whole slide talking about that. For your bullet points going into these experiences, typically don't include a period at the end of it, kind of make it not a run-on sentence, but it doesn't need to have a period. And then next you're going to talk about skills and honors and awards. So for the skills section, you want to, again, don't sell yourself short. So talk about different hard skills that you have. So language skills, if you're bilingual, multilingual, definitely include that. Computer skills, any programming, if you know Microsoft suites, iOS, Google platforms, Outlook, all of that, definitely a good experience, especially with being in this virtual world with 2020. Technical skills that you have, just include that on there. Don't include soft skills listed. Soft skills would be something like customer service, leadership, organization. Those should be demonstrated through your experiences. But do include those hard skills. And then you can also have a section for honors and awards that you've received through communities, organizations, clubs. If it is specifically related to education and those are the only awards that you're including, you can include these honors under your education section. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jasmine to talk about action verbs.
So you might be asking yourself, I know what to put on my resume, but how do I write it? So to make sure that your resume stands out, you need to show how you impacted the community, the organization, whatever you're writing about that you worked in. So you have to ask yourself, what impact did you make? Who have you made it on and how many? Then you use an action verb, not a passive verb, to show how you actually did that. So for example, to the left, we have an example of what you shouldn't do and what would be better. So instead of saying worked towards finding solutions, you could say identified critical needs and created solutions such as blank. And then also avoid complicated words because you want your recruiter to understand exactly what you did. If there's like lingo that is only really known by the people in your organization, maybe actually explain what it is without saying that lingo. And then pro tip, if you see a job that you really, really want, you can use an action verb from the job description because when they ask for people to apply, they'll list your job actual duties, and you can use those verbs because they use a search engine to look through resumes, and so it'll ping when it looks at yours. And now we're gonna go into a Q&A, I think. No, it's Halima.
So just highlighting some of the points that we've already talked about, just some quick do's and don'ts. So as mentioned before, don't list soft skills as their own section. Make sure you're highlighting those when you're talking about your experiences, and don't be vague, use like concrete numbers. So if you worked with X amount of people on this project and you delivered a report to X amount of people, like use those numbers instead of being more like worked with a group of people to create this report, just be more concrete. So make sure you are highlighting those soft skills, express your accomplishments, don't hold back. As Hillary had mentioned before, like you're essentially bragging, you're showing yourself off, and be proud of that and be you. And for college students, make sure you're including all your experiences from the start of college. Some of those high school experiences might be relevant, but those are lower priority. So make sure you're emphasizing stuff post high school graduation first. And then make sure to be utilizing resources. So College Forward, your coaches are a great resource. If you have questions about your resume, if you want someone to edit your resume, and then also your school's career center advisors. So utilize your support network. And next, we are going to move into a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, you can throw them in the Q&A or the chat.
I'll just take a minute here before we move on in case any of you had any burning questions from the first section of our presentation before I dive into our interactive activity where we take a look at actual resume sections. All right, doesn't look like anything's come through yet, but feel free to keep those coming as anything comes up. Just pop a question in there and we'll be sure to answer it when it comes up. So now it's time for the interactive activity. So we'll have two different examples of what a resume section can look like, and just go ahead and vote in the chat, one or two. Here's the first one, two different examples of what a resume header can look like. Put a 1 in the chat if you think number 1 would be better on a resume, and put a 2 in the chat if you think number 2 would be better. I'll give you all a second to vote. A couple 2s. Yeah. Looks like everyone picked the right answer here. It's number 2. So just reiterating a few things that Halima mentioned when talking about headers. It's a good idea to make your name stand out in the header. So having Peter Parker in bold and underlined, maybe like a font size or 2 bigger, just so they know exactly when they pick up the resume, whose resume it is. Doing things like putting proper formatting in your phone number is always important. Just seeing a block of numbers is sometimes harder to read. The LinkedIn address, that's another thing Halima mentioned. You can actually go to your LinkedIn profile and customize it and make it say whatever you want. Like instead of being like a long spelled out like URL address, it can be linkedin.com/in/your name or whatever you want it to be. And yeah, so moving on to the next vote. Oh. It looks like we have a question that I'll quickly, difference between a CV and a resume. And yes, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because we will be answering this later on. So just hold on tight. But basically, a CV is a longer version of a resume, but we'll be jumping way more into detail than that in just a few minutes. So go ahead and vote in the chat for this one, which one you all think is a better looking education section for a student at Austin Community College, ACC. Got a 1. Another person voted for 1. All right. Yeah, those of you who said 1, you're correct. Just calling attention to a few things here. Spelling out Austin Community College is better than putting ACC, just so there's no confusion about where you went to college. They know exactly where it was. Expected graduation versus the dates. It's not necessary to know exactly when you started school, just like your graduation date. So you don't need to put the date you started school. You can either just put the expected graduation date, or if you've already finished college, you can put graduated May 2022 or whatever month and year you graduated. Another thing is putting the name of your degree in there. Instead of just putting that you were a major in something, putting, like, for example here, an Associate of Science in Nursing. That one is more specific. It tells exactly what you studied and what level you studied it at. And it also just sounds more professional, like saying you're an associate of science rather than a major in nursing. And GPA, I'd say definitely include a GPA if it's higher than like a 3.0 or something. Just it shows that you're an above average student. And you can also do things like separate your major GPA from your regular GPA, just to make that stand out and show how awesome you are in your classes. Here's another one for work experience at someone who's a cashier at HEB. Go ahead and vote for whichever one you think does a better job talking about that experience. Let's see, twos, yeah, a few twos. Yeah, all those of you who put 2 in the chat, you're right again. Y'all are doing great at this. So just something I wanted to call attention here was those great action verbs, demonstrated professionalism that really stands out from just saying I was a cashier or I did good customer service. Maintain company values that just is something that you can tailor to whatever job you're applying to. And another thing I wanted to call out here is bullet points. I know a lot of times in professional writings and school writings, you would want to use complete sentences and paragraphs, but in a resume, it's actually preferred to do bullet points. It's quick, it's easy to look at. So as soon as you see what an experience was or what a section was, you can look and see like the top most important sections. And I would always put whatever you think is most valuable from that experience at the top. So whatever your would say is like the main function of the job or the most relevant to the job you're applying to, make that your first bullet point, and then all the others after that. And our last little interactive here is a skills section. I'll give you all a second to vote for whichever one you think is better written there. Got a 2 with an exclamation point. They're excited about that too. Anyone else have thoughts? Another 2, 2s. Yeah, that's right. This is a bit of a dark circle, but yeah, number 2 is the better written bullet point again. You all did great at this, got them all right, I think. And another thing, just calling out here, reinforcing what Helena said, talking about those softwares you've used, even if you aren't officially certified in a software, if you use it on a daily basis and you know how to use it, or you can pick up skills on it very quickly, definitely include it. Definitely, again, make it specific to the job you're applying to. If they mention in the job description that they require you to be proficient in Microsoft Office Suite, put that you're proficient in Microsoft Office Suite if you use Word and PowerPoint in school or other experiences. Another thing, languages, a lot of people don't think about this, but any languages you speak, you can include that as a skill that immediately looks great no matter what sort of thing you're applying to. If you even know a little bit of Spanish, saying like intermediate level speaking and writing Spanish or beginner level speaking and writing Spanish, that shows that like you have another dimension to your personality and like the different kinds of skills you have. And just another thing to mention here with number one is they mentioned teamwork, communication, and organization. So those are some of the soft skills that you wouldn't want to list right out in a skills section, but you would want to incorporate more into your experience sections, and like making it, using those action verbs to describe how you use teamwork, how you use communication or organization in an experience that you've had in the past. And so just talking about making your resume stand out, as I've mentioned a few times now, make it unique and specific to the position you're applying to. You don't need to write a whole new resume every time you apply for a new job, but just making those little tweaks so that it's specific, like rearranging bullet points, highlighting different experiences depending on what the job you're applying to or internship or whatever it is you're applying to is asking for. That really can make it stand out among all of the resumes who are just like, they submit the same resume to every single job, and it's easy for the recruiters to tell. Another thing with making it stand out is mirroring language. As Halima mentioned, if they talk about specific skills they're looking for, putting those words, or I think it might have been Jasmine that mentioned this, I'm sorry. But like they use those search engines on your resume that like a robot looks it over, and if it's like they say they're looking for teamwork and they see teamwork in the resume, that automatically puts it at the top of the pile. So just paying specific attention to the job you're applying for. And so now we have a few different example resumes. Another way of specifying your resume is what kind of thing, like what kind of major you're in or what kind of thing you're applying to. So as you can see here, we have a graphic designer resume that I just pulled off of Google, but it can, in addition to showing their experience, like in the bullet points, it also shows that they know how to put together a page and are a proficient graphic designer. Like it shows creativity with like a few pops of color. And like I really like the symbols for phone number, like they just have the little phone icon and email and address, and they have the LinkedIn symbol for LinkedIn. And they definitely are showing their graphic design skills and the layout of the resume. Another thing is a civil engineer resume, also just one I pulled off of Google, but it's a lot more straightforward, black and white bullet points. They don't need to show their creativity in this, they just need to show their experience that's relevant to the position. So they're just talking about all the different things they've done in engineering. And this is something that goes far beyond just an engineer or graphic designer. Whatever your talk to your code or services office at your college or anyone who might know, they can give you more details about what a specific resume will look like for your industry. Also, as I mentioned, I just pulled these off of Google. So if you're a nurse or nursing major and you're looking for what a resume should look like, I would just Google nurse resume and see what that looks like. And there are different things that any different major or career or anything can add to their resume to make it tailored to that specific position. I'm gonna hand it over to Halima and answer that question from earlier about CVs and talk about some other professional documents.
Yeah, thanks. So definitely a great question earlier asking about the differences. So we're gonna briefly touch on CVs, running resumes, and then also cover letters. So moving into CVs and resumes, they're pretty much the same thing. Writing resume is like a less formal term kind of for your own records. And a CV is a professional document. So some applications, some recruiters may specifically ask for a CV. Some may specify a resume, or some may say like resume or CV. So just keep an eye on what they're asking for. So as a tip, or I guess a few tips. So definitely it's good to have like a CV or running resume, whichever term you prefer, for your own records. So have this document that you're updating regularly. So you have your resume, just include all your experiences, your key accomplishments, your education, like everything. and then make a copy. And then for your applications, you can trim it down. So if it's asking for a resume or even with a CV, trim it down to the specific experiences, skill sets that you have that are matching what the job posting is asking for. So with CVs, running resumes, there's no page limit. So a resume typically is going to be 1 page. So that can be really hard depending on how much experience you have, really hard to narrow it down to just that 1 page. So with the CV, you definitely have more flexibility in how much of your skill set you can be highlighting. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say with that. And we will be also sending out these slides later on, so you will have reference to like these key points. And then lastly, we did want to take a moment to talk about cover letters, keeping in mind this is a completely different type of professional document, but it is something that a lot of applications ask for. So typically if you're submitting a resume, you will be asked to submit a cover letter. Just as a note, cover letters are often listed as like an optional document to include, but it does show a lot of initiative if you do include a cover letter. So I would say it's recommended to include it even if it's not required, because that can kind of like bump you up the recruiter's list of applicants. So a cover letter is essentially a letter. So you're going to include your contact information again. And the purpose of this is to demonstrate why you personally as an individual would be a good fit for this company, the company culture, the position, the organization. So you're going to want to include the date. So this is kind of like old school in the sense of like if you were actually mailing in a letter, so now you are uploading it online, but it still follows the format of if you were mailing it in. So you'll want to have the date. Even if you start writing your cover letter like weeks before you're actually applying, update the date to closer to your actual like, date you're submitting your application. Include the employer address, and then have a salutation. So dear, and then the name, if you have a specific name of a hiring manager, recruiter, if you are able to acquire that information, definitely include a specific name that also looks really, really good on the cover letter. If you can't get that, it's not always possible, say dear hiring manager, hiring team, something along those lines. And then you're gonna have an intro paragraph, so stating like your name, kind of like an overview of your experiences. You know, if you just graduated or you're a college senior, you can be like, hi, my name is Halima, I just graduated from college, or I'm a recent graduate, I have these key experiences. So it's like a general overview. And then you're going to want to list 1 to 2 paragraphs listing your experiences. So pick your most relevant jobs or extracurricular involvements that you have that fit that position and dive a little deeper. And these are written as paragraphs, not as bullet points. So it is a different style than a resume. So you can highlight some more of your writing style. And then you'll have a conclusion paragraph, again, summing up that you think you'd be a good fit. Sometimes applications will say, you know, list if you have a mode of transportation or if you're willing to relocate, that kind of thing. So definitely make sure to include that. Like they'll say like include this in your cover letter. So the conclusion paragraph would be a good way to say like, just want to emphasize like I am willing to relocate, that kind of thing. Express your gratitude for being included as an applicant. And considering the process, and then have a signature. So like sincerely, and then your name. And then I'm going to pass it off to Jasmine next to talk about formatting your resumes.
So there is the question for whatever professional document you are submitting on what the format should be. And there are pros and cons for Word and PDF, but after this slide, I'll be explaining to you what is the better one in most cases. So for Word, pro is that recruiters might like the option to edit or take notes and ping your resume as important or whatever. Some cons for Word is that some recruiters might have trouble opening the document. When they open it, it might be more than 1 page, which is seen as unprofessional for resumes. Even if it looks like 1 page on your computer, it might be totally different on someone else's. And the formatting can change your page numbers and margins, so it won't look like what you want it to look like. And then the pros for PDF is that the formatting stays the same. There's no issue of that happening in PDF. It looks more professional because you can't really edit it in any way. Then PDF con is that some scanning softwares have trouble reading PDFs, but new softwares are able to read PDFs. So it really depends on what your employer uses. So ultimately, Unless they specify what they want, you should stick with a PDF. They might specify they want a Word document if perhaps they don't have the right software to read PDFs, but PDF will make you look really professional. Now we're going to Q&A. So if y'all can just post in the chat or in the Q&A section about any questions at all. There are no stupid questions. This is our last slide. So if like you have any questions at all over anything, now's the time. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. We'll leave the Q&A open for another minute in case anything comes to you as you sit and digest all that you just learned. But I believe the gift card raffle, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but you'll be hearing either from your coach or from someone at College Forward if you won. But thank you all for sticking around and attending today. Yeah, I hope you had fun and diving into the job verse and learning something about resumes.